Hi, and welcome to another edition of Edmonds This Week. It's been a while. There's been a lot going on. If you know, you know, but it was time to come back with a general election edition of this discussion. I hope that what I'm going to share will be insightful, a little helpful to help you get to where you want to be. If you haven't voted yet, or if you're still on the fence on a few things, and depending on how I feel, I may give a very rare public endorsement on someone or something. So let's see how this works out. So, as we know, next week, Wednesday, Tuesday, we are going to be voting. And I'm just going to show the city council folks here and the prop one. And I do want to give props to my Edmonds News because this is where I pulled this information from. Thank you, Larry and Teresa. Um, we're getting ready to elect some new people in. It's happening. And I think there's some people that are still on the fence. One of the things that I did notice as I was putting this together, I always try to look at who's raised how much money. And it's not because I think that the more money you have, the more you could win, which in some cases that is true. But it's also just kind of interesting to see how much someone feels like they need in order to do their campaign in the way that it needs to happen. And so, even in looking at these numbers, at first I was like, are these low in comparison to previous year? But then I went back and reminded myself that in 2023, I maybe only thought that because the mayoral race, specifically Mike Rosen's campaign, raised over $85,000. And I know my little signature there is blocking it, so sorry. But everyone else is kind of like in that 15, 16, 17,000 a couple of years ago. But again, if we look at today, candidates almost have raised like twice that amount, depending on which race that they were in and what position that they're running in. The one thing I do want to, just two things about this I want to kind of touch on. And one is, when you talk about people raising money, and this is not something people like to talk about a lot, but it really does need to be talked about, is endorsements. And sometimes candidates go for endorsements because there's usually maybe a financial element to it that will help them be able to raise enough funds to do the things that they need to do. And it is very easy to say, oh, if they were a viable candidate, they'll get donations from private individuals. That's just not realistic, especially in a local election, unless, especially in this climate, everyone's kind of counting their pennies. They're not able to give as much as they normally would if they would donate at all. So I will say that some of the reason why people will go for, maybe the organizational endorsements, however you feel about that. But fundraising for a campaign is very, very difficult. It's not that easy. So that's why I never necessarily weigh in one way or the other on somebody's endorsements, because I don't know what their life is. I don't know what their, situation is. Some people can lend themselves their own money for their campaign, but not everyone can do that, especially when you're looking at a local election. But I will say it's also been interesting. I know people have been reading and seeing about this. Is what's been going on with the Prop 1, which is the levy lift. So yes, for Edmonds is for it. Keep Edmonds affordable is against it. And I think the only thing I really want to say about that is just remember we all still live here. We all are going to run into each other at the grocery store, at the restaurant, downtown, on the waterfront. And let's just make sure that whatever your position is on something, that it doesn't have to be so personal and detrimental that it creates rifts within your community. But here's the reality. However this lands, whether yes for Prop 1 wins or no for Prop 1 wins, there is no winner. There is going to be some consequences one way or the other in how we manage finances in this city, the public infrastructures, the assets that we have. No one vote one way or the other is going to alleviate any of that. And then there's everything else that's going to be happening, on top of that. And again, I did want to hit just briefly on the school district one too. And again, it's always interesting to see who raises money and who doesn't. And so Keith Smith, who doesn't have anyone running against him, he didn't raise any money. Fine, makes sense. But with the District 4 one, the only other two candidates that have raised money is Thomas, or Tom, if you know him, and Jason Moore has just been running on mouth. That could be beneficial. You never know. So it'll be interesting to see how these two races and on top of those come out. Going back to endorsements for just a second. Again, one of the reasons why I'm starting to do this, because my goal was to help people make sure that they have enough access or know where certain resources are for them to be the most engaged and educated voter before they mark their ballot. And this is going to be a difficult year. There's a lot that is going on. We already had the special election earlier this year, and now we have this one. And so one thing that I know people were messaging me about that they got confused on is the voters pamphlet. We got two of them this time around. So you got the first one, which was super thin, and that's just about a Senate measure and then also the Court of Appeals. And then you got the big one. And you got this, and it's everything under the sun, whether it's on your ballot or not. So it's a lot of heavy reading, but you can get through it if you know exactly what you're trying to do and what you're trying to go for. And of course, you were probably also getting in the mail candidate flyers and also other groups that have made endorsements of candidates or propositions. The one thing to keep in mind with those, though, is that they don't necessarily cover all the races, and they can be very specific to a thing. Like, for example, the Progressive Voters Guide came out, and I've seen a lot of chatter online about, how come certain things were not in there, or certain races were not in there, like Charter Commission is not one of the ones that are in there. So getting those guides, as great as they can be and help you based on your ideology, it doesn't mean that they've covered every role. So make sure you take some time, read through some of these things, look at what's happening around you, and make the best decision that you can. Now, if you're like me, though, I like to wait till the actual election day and take my ballot down to the ballot box. That might be something many more of us might want to do this year. So there's been news that's been coming out about the delays with the USPS because of new policies could be delaying service and deliveries. So officials are encouraging everyone to not utilize USPS if you don't have to, and use one of the drop boxes instead. I still intend on using the drop box, but I will probably go crazy early and not wait until the day of. Maybe I'll do it the day before, because if that's the case, then some of those boxes may fill up super fast. And I know there's people that come out and get them on a daily basis. So just kind of plan for that. And again, I got this off of David Partial. Hi, David. He found this on the ground as he was kind of walking around town doing some stuff. So please don't take your ballots for granted. This one wasn't filled out, so I don't think that this was one that was going to be mailed, but just kind of be careful out there and make sure that you have your ballot, that you filled it out, and that you have sent it off in the method that you are hoping to do that with. There's some other news that's going to be coming down the pipeline, and for some, it's not going to be something that they've heard about before, or maybe not understand how it impacts you. As someone that works in the nonprofit sector, specifically in fundraising and fund development, one of the things we have to do is always kind of be cognizant of what's happening around us, what's happening on the federal level, what's happening on the state level. What are people's capacity to give, right? And this has been a very challenging year, and I don't foresee it getting any better going into 2026, even 2027, before it gets a lot worse. And those are the things that I've been kind of having to think about in my profession, in the work that I do, and the populations that we serve. And currently, the organization I work for supports seniors and older adults throughout Snohomish County. So I have gotten a really quick, deep dive into issues that matter to the older population, whether they're working or not. And so there's something called Community Development Block Grants, or CDBG. And these are funds that come from HUD, And so one of the things that it actually covers, and I just lost my place, so I apologize. Did it disappear? It disappeared on me. Well, I'm just going to talk through it. One of the things that it does is that it talks about what it is that it covers. So here we go. Thank you. So, and there's the description of a community development block grant. So it helps cities and municipalities be able to deliver services to those in our community that need it, whether it's housing, food, that type of thing. And so breaking it down, if I look specifically to what the one in Everett does, for example, when they go through this process and start to look at other groups and organizations that might apply for funding, usually CDBG grants help to cover issues with behavioral health, housing, and other public services like food insecurity. And you can see at the bottom, seniors and persons with disabilities. So, Alicia, why are we talking about this? Well, I'm trying not to get emotional as I talk about this, but it's a thing. So requirements that are coming down from the federal level will potentially will make it difficult for organizations that serve seniors, in our case, seniors and persons with disabilities, a lot harder to support and help them because new regulations are coming down around citizenship verification. And so I'm just going to talk about this just a little bit high level. And so organizations are being reached out about this from these municipalities that distribute this funding and saying, hey, this is what's coming down. Not all municipalities are going to interpret how to do this the same way. So that's also a little question mark that floats around. But in the case of one of these cities, they're saying that we may have to be in a position, we being these organizations that supply these services, will have to do citizenship verification before we can do any service whatsoever. So we're talking Meals on Wheels. We're talking about minor home repair, food and nutrition, anything that's even an emergency that we would not be allowed to help that person or to serve that person until we have helped with the verification process. We don't know what that's going to be yet. This is also very new, but it's also daunting to even think about it. And so I want you to think about this as the fact that if one of these municipalities goes to the letter of the law here in Snohomish County, which would mean that if a senior wanted to get the benefits of Meals on Wheels, we would potentially have to take in their information and not own in documentation. And it's not just for that person, it's for the entire household. So even if it's just to serve that one person, that one senior, we would have to verify that everyone in the household are US citizens. And it would be up to the municipalities to confirm that. So in theory, it would go from person calling the organization to get this service, apply for this service. We would give them those materials to apply it for. Then we would also now have to collect birth certificate, any of these other things as part of the verification process. Then we would have to hand it off to the municipality. And then they would have to decide whether or not it's verified. And then only then, if they would say yes, can we serve that person. So it's a lot to digest and think about. It's still knowing that we don't know how it's going to land, but it's going to land in some way. And it's probably going to be different depending on what municipality an organization has partnered with. But I want you to think about that. I want you to think about a senior that's hungry, someone or anyone, a person with disabilities that needs this, extra food or needs this service because of what's happening right now with the government shutdown and cuts to SNAP and WIC, right? It's okay, though that's going to be more need for our services for them, which, okay, we're prepared. We're going to do the best we can to do that. But now there's this additional barrier. So we couldn't give someone food the same day or the next day. We don't know what that would look like. So it's all of these things to say that there's a lot that's happening financially in this country that has nothing to do with anyone's political affiliation. Because I'm sure there are Republicans that are on fixed income and utilizing these services, just as there are Democrats, just as there's independents, whatever you have. It has nothing to do with partisanship, but it is going to make things a lot harder. And so when I think about all those things, I want to own this. Um, Again, I usually, as many times as people reach out to me and ask me my opinion on who to vote for or anything like that, and I would usually just say, here's materials, and let that be your driver. Um, there is one particular item on this ballot that I am publicly talking about, and it is Prop 1. So, based on the past 14 minutes of what I've talked about with you guys, I just found it very difficult for me to be able to vote yes on Prop 1, knowing what's coming down the pipeline, knowing what's happening right now, and knowing how it's going to impact my role and the roles of those that I work with in my organization, and trying to create, these stop gaps or be able to continue to serve people. Um, so I personally just am not voting yes, and that is why. It's not that I don't like public facilities. It's not that I want to see budgets cut or resources reduced. I think it's going to happen either way. But when I can see firsthand how certain populations are already being affected before it, I just can't. But here's what I do want to say about this too. We don't have to be confrontational with each other if we're not voting the same way. We don't have to, at least not in this case. Because, like I said, we all live here. We're all community members. We're going to run into each other, and everyone is going to vote the way that they want to based on their life experiences, their beliefs, and what have you. And that's fine. So I'm not railing against anyone that's voting yes, even though several people have tried to rail against me for saying that I'm voting no. Why? That's a waste of energy. Don't do that. Don't spend your time being upset with me or trying to insult me because I'm not voting the way that you feel like I should. Just don't do that. So all I have to say is next Tuesday is going to be a major day. And I just want to encourage everyone who can vote to please vote. 2, make sure that you get your ballot in as early as possible. 3, if you're able to do it at a drop box, please do so. There's one in downtown Edmonds at the library, and now they have it where you can just drive through, so you don't have to get out the car and park or anything. And then there's actually one at Edmonds College too, if you're on the north end of Edmonds, if you don't want to go into downtown. And again, just vote your conscience and be okay with it. But let's also make sure that we're being respectful of how others might be voting and why. Because like I said, there's no, especially with Prop 1, there's no winner. There's going to be something not great that happens on either side. You just have to figure out which one is the one you want to lean more towards. And again, it was pretty quiet with city council electing shenanigans. It hasn't been that bad, except for the past week or so. And I really hope that the situation will just kind of resolve itself and not carry over into the new administration, because again, we all have to work together, and hopefully everyone is walking into the mindset of that they are there to represent all of Edmonds, not just a certain group. So with that, stay dry tomorrow. Happy trick-or-treating or whatever you're going to do that day. It's supposed to rain, so just be careful. So with that, take care, everybody.